Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool, I don't know if I could call this quite a prototype preview, but it is definitely an early premiere, if you will, of a new watch from a newer brand that I am just getting experience with. It's so new that I will probably mispronounce the name on first go. Albedo or Albedo watches. They are a Netherlands-based micro brand with a passion for chronographs and the art of watchmaking. Now, in terms of chronographs, some key characteristics and exactly what you're looking for something within this space, of course, you're going to find external pushers to activate timing functions, as well as multiple sub-dials to measure elapsed time, often featuring additional scales dependent on the subgenre. I think this one very clearly falls within that kind of classic motorsports aesthetic here. This is known as their Solaris, and it is their second release aimed to deliver their idea of the ultimate daily driver. An all-steel sports chronograph with a fixed bezel, right, which is nice, and you're going to get that tachymeter scale as well, and as well as that kind of versatile scale and sizing for daily wear. This is definitely something that you can wear on a daily basis thanks to pretty tidy dimensions. This is going to go for €250 with a 20% off early bird discount of €200 depending on the time of you watching this. This release should be pretty recent, unless you're watching this months or years from now. Then you might be watching this to get ready for the restock. Well, so yeah, there's that. But with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, now this sample was kindly provided by the brand, but of course, they're not going to have any editorial input or oversight on my review, and the thoughts and feedback are always my own. Now, jumping into the aesthetic, guys, I think we can all see there's definitely shades of Rolex Daytona, and I think that is a good thing. I like that they, definitely went with some bold color combination choices, so it's not a straight homage, but at the same time, it does have that aesthetic. It does have that steel, very sporty and robust styling, which is nice. And it actually has a lot of heft for a quartz watch, essentially. So I think that's nice. Now, in terms of the dimensions, 39 millimeters in diameter, which, very nice. 12.9 millimeters thick, which is, I think, a bit thick for a quartz chronograph, to be quite honest. That case back protrudes a lot more than I would honestly expect for this movement. I would imagine if we open up the case back, it's not like the movement's really pushed out that far. So interesting choice there, but I will say that this crown, as you can see, is screw down, and this is going to give you 10 atmospheres or 100 meters of water resistance. So that would be the trade-off. Also, you are getting screw in crowns as well, so this is very confidence inspiring in terms of that more robust kind of overbuilt feel. So good on them for that. In terms of the lug to lug, 45.5 millimeters, and again, these are all measurements from my own calipers. So the build here, brushed and polished 316L stainless steel. You're getting a flat sapphire crystal. Again, screw down crown, screw down pushers. The movement inside, although you cannot see it, is actually the Seiko, which let me unscrew these crowns so that you can see, which some people might aesthetically appreciate that styling more with the pushers more pronounced. Check it out. So you're going to get that Seiko Instruments Meca-Quartz VK63, which has quartz timing, but mechanical chrono action. So you're going to get a 1/5 second interval in terms of that timing sweep on the chronograph hand. You're going to have a multi-headed lever that's going to disengage and snap it right on back to 0, similar to a traditional chronograph gear train, which is nice, versus it sweeping back, which you might find on other types of quartz chronographs. So a lot of people do enjoy that. Another thing is, of course, these are actual mechanical pushers. They're not buttons. It's not electrically sending you some numb feeling. They're not mushy. There's a nice click to it, and it is satisfying and very fidgetable from that perspective. This chrono mechanism actually consists of over 20 individual parts, and again, it does kind of mimic the traditional mechanical chronograph gear train, which makes sense because, of course, Seiko specializes in that, right? They were some of the pioneers within the space. Now I'm going to screw these back down. And let's get into this dial. You're getting a Sunray dial with date at the 4.5 o'clock. As you can see, you're getting it nicely framed and still color matched in terms of the date disc. So I appreciate that. So it's nicely integrated, but still feels quite finished. You're getting applied indices. They're using Superluminova BGW9, so it will have a blue hue in terms of its glow. And then, of course, like I mentioned before, water resistance thanks to these screw-down crowns in terms of being confidence-inspiring, because it's harder to mess this up, right? Or leaving your crown popped out or something like that. To 10 atmospheres, 100 meters, which is nice. 20 millimeter lug width. Very, very nice, very versatile. So you can absolutely, especially with this steel bezel, and black dial, it's going to be very versatile in terms of strap changes. This would look fantastic on a NATO or leather, even a sporty, maybe retro kind of rubber rally style strap. Now, the bracelet is solid stainless steel. It does have male end links, which I know isn't for everyone, but I will say because of the short lug to lug, I think it's fine and works. It does have split pin construction, so nothing crazy when it comes to this. This is probably the part of the watch that feels the most kind of parts bin like. I don't know if they specifically had custom tooling done for this or if they just made an end link that would fit. I will say build wise, it has a Seiko movement. There's some similarities in terms of the fact that the case and dial details are elevated a bit above, I'd say, the bracelet details. So, but if you're not a bracelet person, then that doesn't really matter. You have a nice taper from 20 millimeters down to 18 to this push button flip lock style. And I will say, not the most pleasureful. Is a little bit of a grit to the action here, a little stickiness, but I'm sure, of course, that will wear in and break in the more you wear it. But it's those little fine refinement points that typically we come to take for granted over time. I think nice enough in terms of having multiple points of manual micro adjustment. I don't think, especially at this price point, it would be a deal breaker for, honestly, they could have got away with a much cheaper clasp. This is going to be, again, a bit more overbuilt, but I wouldn't say overly refined. With all that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, or 19 centimeters circumference, that it fits quite nicely. I think, again, size-wise, this really fits the bill, and again, perfect for everyday wear. And I know that side profile was looking a lot taller when I just had it in hand, but I will say on wrist, everything sinks in quite nicely, and I don't feel like it has a lot of unbalanced traits when it comes to the visual weight. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you can notice quite a bit of perspective distortion. All of a sudden, the sides of my wrist kind of fall away, and the watch case seems enlarged, thus kind of making the bracelet disappear. But if I keep my wrist down here, check it out, a lot truer to scale in terms of what your eye would see. So I'll keep my wrist nice and low and then tighten up the frame here so that we can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And as you guys can see, I think that's quite dialed in. And if you get the early bird pricing, €200, that's pretty impressive, right? So yeah, I think, it's well under $300, even if you pay full price on it, or you say US dollars anyway. But yeah, I think this one is, look at the details. That's where it, in the good ways, reminds me a lot of Seiko, is going to be the fine dial details. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we found out that this came out of a Seiko factory, to be quite honest. It just reminds me so much, again, which makes sense because it has the Meca-Quartz movement, which is a lot of fun. Really, the main drawback is going to be a shorter You know, battery life typically going to be around 3 years. You know, and it's not for a mechanical watch. It's not like you're getting it serviced every 3 years. So having to change a battery potentially, especially depending on how much you play or fidget with that tachymeter hand, or I should say chronograph hand there, is gonna make that wear out a bit more. But yeah, I think this thing wears very, very well. What do you guys think? Again, I know the profile of me holding it in hand made it seem a lot thicker, but I will say again, on as it lays on top of the wrist, the organic curvature, the flow there, to me, it doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look too shabby. So with that said, let's actually get this off wrist, set it for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, as you can see, surprisingly good, but very reminiscent. I mean, I guess since it's blue Lume, maybe Seiko didn't produce it, or maybe they just used different Lume compound. But I will say, yeah, it's very Seiko-like. There's little plops, but that's well applied. The hands, although slender, again, well applied, and you know, very functional. And again, I'm not making any promises this came out of a Seiko factory out of Malaysia or something like that. Obviously at the price point, I don't see that it would come out of Japan, but I'm still impressed regardless of where it comes from. You know, wherever they sourced the production on this, they knew their way around in terms of dial and case manufacturing, which can, especially in this price point, be a bit of something you kind of take for granted. One thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes run alike in less than optimal lighting. And check that out. Look at that dial. You get that nice sun ray effect there. You have multiple textures working with and against each other. You have the brushed effect on that bezel. So very nice, very classic. Again, a little bit more industrial in terms of the bracelet finish, but it's a simple kind of 3-link oyster style. I get it. I've seen worse. I've experienced worse, but I've definitely experienced better. But at this price point, I don't know. Have I experienced that much better? I don't know if anything jumps out at me. So it's not like it's a travesty at the price point, but it's just not a class leader. So with that said, we'll get this lights back on here, and let's go over some closing thoughts, guys. On wrist, surprisingly solid, you know, in terms of that heft, right? It does give you a nice hefty feeling, especially for a quartz powered watch. Maybe even too heavy for, you know, for what it is, and feeling like it slightly lacks the refinement you'd find in a lighter weight option. And of course, some of those lighter weight options are going to feel cheaper. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. So it's not like there's an objective, you know, one versus the other. Like, it just really depends on kind of what you're looking for. So I will say, if you're worried about quartz chronographs being too light, don't worry about it with this one. And if you do like the size at the 39 millimeters, you know, because you have a smaller wrist, just be ready to, if you're expecting this thing to be super lightweight, it isn't necessarily. And but one way you could definitely lighten it up is by taking it off of the steel bracelet. So you still do have some options. So if you're not a huge bracelet fan and you want to put on some sick rally strap, that will absolutely work, and will absolutely also lighten the load on your wrist. Now, in terms of that refinement, right, that heavier feel, you know, I just want to make sure, of course, we do consider the fact that it does have a solid 100 meter water resistance in terms of its robustness, its build, right? It has screw down pushers, it has a screw down crown, screwed in case back. So there's going to be a lot of seals at work there, and gasket work and everything. So, you know, it's not like this kind of hollow watch. It definitely, for it to be able to maintain that depth rating, you know, that there's some more extra effort that's put into it. And in terms of kind of, again, speaking of trade-offs, I can live with the split pins in terms of the construction of the bracelet. You know, that's not super impressive, but I would like to see less stickiness and grittiness kind of in that clasp action. And, you know, it's something, it depends on, if you don't wear it on the bracelet, it doesn't even matter. It's a non-issue. But if you do, when you're taking it on and off, I'm sure you're not going to want to eat up your nails or, feel that kind of stickiness in the action. You want it to be relatively smooth while still having decent detent in terms of retention, right? And everything staying snapped together. In terms of model variants, do check the site links for current options and availability. And then in terms of comparable models, guys, I did recently review the trending Seiko Essentials SSB 479 Meca-Quartz Chronograph at $450. That's full retail. Typically, you can get it for under 300, or I should say under 400. Maybe closer into the threes. Whether it be higher threes if you don't have a good relationship with an authorized dealer, or somewhere in the mid 300s or so. If you do know somebody pretty closely, it's just, again, it all kind of just depends on availability, and then it depends on how much you're willing to hunt for a deal. But yeah, that one is awesome. Compared to this, though, this is a lot cheaper, even if you figure out, all right, well, I could still not pay full MSRP. For this, you will pay full MSRP, but it's still, again, well under $300 US. And then, in terms of the bottom line, I'd say it's just a very capable and fun piece for, again, price-wise, well under $300, and very Seiko-like in its case and dial execution details, but also, feeling a little bit more overbuilt, right? Albeit, yes, less refined, feeling bracelet. So the bracelet, it's pretty thick. It does add a lot of heft to the overall package, but I think it flows. It'd be nice if they refine that, but I mean, again, at the price point, a small brand, it's not like they have the economies of scale where they're, getting a bunch of these pre-staged. I'm sure there's limited numbers that they're hoping to sell out, and then eventually, kind of flip the profits to continue to grow and expand. So just because it has Seiko movement doesn't mean we can necessarily expect Seiko rationale when it comes to exactly how they're going to be marketing these. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you're new, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.